The screen needs to take you one more moment. Okay, we are live on YouTube. Now I'm putting us truly live through the webinar. Here we go. Start webinar.
Hello, welcome everybody. As you are coming in, we're glad you're joining us today. If you could just type your name in the chat and where you are joining us from. I am Alexandra James. I will be the host for today's webinar, and I am in Richmond, Virginia. When you're putting in your name and where you're from, make sure it says to all panelists and attendees. We are glad you are joining us today. And we have with us Dee, that's going to be in the background doing some tech support, and Dee is in Chicago. Next slide, Dee. Hi, Michelle from Western New York. Hi, Andrew from Minnesota. Glad to see you. Hi, Belinda from Corpus Christi, Texas. So we'll just go ahead and start because we have 30 minutes. And today we're talking about financial vitality after the loss of a loved one. And of course, the ways to engage are, hi, Tammy from Pennsylvania. Nice to see you. If you aren't talking, that's if you raise your hand, put your phone on mute. When you're ready to comment, please raise your hand and we will unmute you, and then you will need to unmute yourself. Please be patient with us and feel free to type your comments in the chat and make sure it's going to all panelists and attendees. Next slide. So of course, to those who've been with us, we have some agreements to make sure that this is a safe place for us to have mutual learning. We're going to speak from our own experience and use I statements. We're going to use the golden rule, which means we're going to treat people the way we want to be treated. We're going to bring our full presence, no multitasking. And if you need a minute, take a minute. And if you agree, please type I agree in the chat. And as you're typing, I agree, Dee's going to launch a poll. We want you to participate just to get a feel. We have a lot of questions about different aspects of the topics today. So we just want to get a pulse to feel kind of where you were and what you were expecting. So when you thought about coming to the webinar, were you more interested in discussing not being able to afford doing what you wanted to do, inheriting wealth, the logistics of dealing with someone else's finances, or something else? And we are about at 45% of people who voted. Thank you so much. 72%, just a few more people. And we have 51 more seconds. So I think there's only one, we have 8 out of 11. So there's about a couple more people. I see someone else just joined us. Welcome. We are taking a poll right now. So please just click on the answer that best describes what you were thinking about when you thought about joining this webinar. Great. Okay, so I don't want us to, I hope everyone, yep. So mostly everybody, top answer was not being able to afford doing what you wanted to do. And then the second was around the logistics of dealing with someone else's finances. And third was inheriting wealth. So with that being said, thank you. Hi, Anna. Hi, Belinda. Hi, Cara. Thank you for typing. I agree. So, we've been talking about grief. So today we're just gonna, hi Dana, nice to see you. We're gonna just go into some of these questions. Dee, you're gonna launch the first question and we'll just dive right in and have some conversation. How do you navigate not being able to afford putting someone to rest in the way you or they wanted you to? For example, not being able to afford a funeral, a tombstone, a gravesite, etc. And for our regulars, you all know that my mother passed in December, and my brother did about 3 years ago. And so it was the first time I had to upfront deal with those, particularly, especially with my mother, because my mother handled everything with my father, with my brother. But one of the things that she did at that point, she was like, this is just too much for someone to deal with while they are grieving. And she was like, I don't want you to have to deal with this if something happens to your father or I. And so what she did was buy the plots and started paying on the plots. Of course, we didn't know that she would be gone 3 years later. But that was I really appreciated that because I had to take the lead. It's so much when you have to take the lead. So that helped. And now with my father, he's been like, he told the funeral home director, like, let's just try to plan everything out. So, she won't have to deal with that. So that's kind of my experience to this. I think, when working with families, you have to do the best you can based on what you have. But I've really understood the need for life insurance, even if it's just enough to cover the burial. And so that's extremely important. Anybody else have any insight into this question? Belinda said, yeah, that's a good idea. My parents did that. Andrew says, I feel like there are times when finances for when someone dies needs to be talked about well ahead and when they pass away. Yeah, Andrew, and you know what it is? And my father said this when he was saying it. He was like, I'm going to plan my whole funeral out. I mean, my father's a minister. So he was like, the whole program. And I was like, oh, he said, people don't want to talk about death because somehow they feel like that's going to, you know, you just want to think about life, but you have to. And a lot of times, people do put that off. It's like, oh, I don't want to think about that now. And it's a little, to me, I guess, like selfish because it's made me think about like, oh my gosh, I need a will. What if something happens to me? What's going to happen with my daughters? And also, it's really about not you, but what you do for the family that you leave behind. Um, and then, a lot of times in the communities we work in, people don't have life insurance. They'll have a lot of stuff other than that. And then you see the classic GoFundMe. And so I really think, financial literacy around health, around life insurance and around wills and et cetera is something that we have to start making a priority in financial literacy work with families. And then Dana says, having the discussions and planning ahead in that case of parents is very helpful. Unexpected or loss of younger people is harder. Insurance for burial is good, but it's more important to know what people want beforehand. I do not want to be buried. I view it as a waste of money. I hope I die after my mother because she doesn't agree with me. Yeah, I'm not too much into the spending the money to put in the ground either. And I totally agree, Dana. My brother died from choking to death and it was just totally out the blue. And that was rough because, he was 42. Like no one, a parent never thinks they're going to have to bury, their child. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And I've seen where I have some other family members where they wanted to be cremated and the children or the spouse didn't agree and it kind of went against their wishes based on their own religious beliefs. And I think that's just really not cool. Yes, religious implications are very important to consider and people's non-religious, right, implications. Maybe they just want to be cremated and thrown in the ocean and people should have that right. Next question, D. What do you do to meet financial challenges experienced through loss? What do you do to meet the financial challenges experienced through loss? Again, because this is so new for me, One of the things that I've learned in the last couple of months, it's not just, like Dana was saying, it's not just about the beforehand discussion about the actual burial, but it's also about the finances. And we learned a lot of lessons. We had like some complications, like there was, stuff that my father was already on, but then it wasn't. And so like we've taken those lessons where he's added me to all of his accounts. So I don't have to go to the bank in the middle of all of this and show the death certificate and prove this and prove that. And those things were hard. They were hard because, I just lost my mother. I didn't want to think about losing my father, but it's important. Dana says, if it is a partner, most companies would be more than willing to work with you if they know. COVID has been really beneficial to some, more knowledge in this. Definitely, definitely. I think we have learned how fleeting life is. The younger you are, you tend to just still have that hat on, like, oh, I'm not even thinking about death. And that's what we thought with my brother. I would have never thought that he would have died by choking to death and leaving behind his daughters and his wife. And so, that was pre-COVID, but freak accidents happen. So planning, I think, is important. Um, Anybody else? Yes, Tamara. This question pertains not only to situations around death, but also in divorce. I lost sole income in the household and had to start with nothing and supported myself and my kids. Yes. I know we're talking about, and this kind of goes into our grief deck that we just did for the cafes. It's not just about grief, and you've probably heard Kathy speak about it. It's not just about grief and loss around death, but grief and loss around everything. I'm divorced. I've been divorced for 10 years. I'm getting remarried in a couple of weeks, which I never thought I would. But that is like a form of death, right? And I had to start all over again. And so I totally, totally agree with that, Tamara. Dana says, yes. Tamara says, congratulations. Thank you. Kara says, losing my spouse in March. Oh my goodness. So sorry to hear that. I lost half of our income. I had to relook at my budget and decide what we need. Yes. I have learned a lot since then, how credit cards work, loans work, etc. Andrew says, draw from your community. Even if someone can't give you financial support, they can provide support in other ways. The other thing, to your point, this is a Kara. Let me see. Yes, to your point, Kara, my dad was like the provider and my mom managed the household. And he had to take over. And my mom would tell me, like, look, because she had this short run, found out she had cancer in June. She died in December. And she started showing me stuff. She's because her dad doesn't know. And I thought she was just playing, but like literally he didn't know. Like my mother handled everything. So there was this whole relearning process for him, for me to help him. So very, very, very important point that you mentioned, Kara. Like even if one spouse, is going to handle the finances, at least leave something behind. I mean, it is 6 months later, and we are still trying to piece things together because my mother tried to make us sit down, both of us, and we really didn't. I did it a little bit more, and we're still trying to piecemeal stuff to this day. Dana says most organizations, Lions, Moose Lodge, Masons have some benefits available to any member, as well as the military. Again, knowing is key to figure it out. Definitely. Totally agree. D, next slide. What is your felt experience of inheriting wealth? Drama. Right, especially if it's not specifically written out. This person gets this person gets that, this person gets this. Totally. I have witnessed that. We didn't have that issue. It's just me and my older brother left. But yeah, I have seen it show up in extended family. Belinda says, yep, you really find out who a person is. And Belinda agreed. Actually, I did have a minor experience. One of my mother's siblings kind of like was on that vibe and was something he had didn't even help. Like, really? Like the day before the funeral? Like it's always one. And yeah, so I had to like, match that energy. But there's always one, that does something in the drama if it's not really laid out. Um, I think the other thing is Andrew said agree, drama all day. It was watching my father and his siblings deal with my grandfather's passing, and it was really difficult to watch and reinforced how I feel I should and shouldn't act in the future for sure. So agree. And you have to be very, very specific. Um, my felt experience now about inheriting wealth, I just share is that, my father and I just had this conversation around this very thing. Like what does that look like? And then what are the implications for all of the grandchildren, right? So Dana said, get a financial advisor, regardless of how much. It is imperative to figure out to deal with and the tax implications for sure. For sure. Because, oh, they're coming in. Guys are great. Belinda says, don't know about wills. Didn't know about wills till my dad passed. In Texas, if something is stated in a will is given away before a person dies, then the will is null and void. Had no idea. What? Wow. Wow. I did not know that either. I wonder if that's in other states. Kara said, when my husband had a heart attack at 45, oh my goodness. So being young and dealing with mother-in-law, etc., his life insurance comes to me, had a lot of mixed feelings. So I felt I needed a lawyer to feel confident in decisions. Definitely. Oh, somebody, thank you. Let me see. I'm just reading somebody. Belinda, make sure it says your stuff says to all panelists and attendees. So I was reading yours, but I hadn't paid attention. Thank you, Dana. Yeah, definitely mixed feelings about that. Again, my heart goes out to you, Kara. I understand vicariously because of my brother and my sister-in-law. It's a lot. Um, Next question, D. How are you planning? Oh, that goes right into that. You're so welcome. How are you planning for your children's or your grandchildren's future? So kind of in the same theme, I'm like, okay, while we're doing all this stuff with my mom, I don't have like a lot of stuff, but the things that I do have in my express wishes, I'm going to make sure that I get a will. Kara says she just completed her will. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because the other thing is, if you don't have anything and the state decides, that adds even more drama, let alone if you do have a will. But if the state has to do it, it's just, you can forget it. All kind of drama. And I've seen that show up, in my work with families. Like, anybody else? How you're planning for your children's or grandchildren's future? Life insurance. I got more life insurance. I have life insurance through my job with Be Strong Families, but I also have additional life insurance. So they don't have to worry about covering expenses for my death. Dana says, in the course of my divorce, I am determined to be specific and laid out and then give that info to my close friends and parents. Definitely. I think the other thing about the planning for your children's or your grandchildren's future that's somewhat related to this, financially, but also making sure you identify who has the power of attorney, not just for financial, but also for medical decisions. Um, that's extremely, extremely important. And that's one of the things that we want to update with my father so I can be able to talk to the doctors, know everything that's going on. Tamara says, I only have a life insurance policy through work as well. I have both of my daughters listed as beneficiaries 50-50. Me too. Because I have twins and I did the same thing with the additional life insurance. And then one thing I'm planning on my children or my grandchildren's future, so particularly my children, is getting them life insurance now while they're little. And the minute they have children, getting life insurance. And when going through this process, my mom had done that. Like I didn't believe it. Like she's so on point. She had like life insurance on all the grandkids. Not a lot, but enough that if something happened, they could be buried. So I think it's not just what we're planning on, leaving them like a house or, the things that people usually do, but having enough life insurance. So if something happens, and then maybe doing whole life, right? That was the other thing, to do the whole life, because then they can also pull from that if they needed some money for something that's an emergency. And of course, the younger you do it, the better it is. I'm in my 40s, so it would be a ridiculous cost right now to do that. But next question, D. How do you or would you manage paying bills and keeping on top of finances when you're also grieving? I don't really have an answer for that, because we're 6 months later, we're still figuring it out, and it's hard. It is definitely, definitely hard, which I think if we had like sat down, like my mother said, and taken notes, we would have been okay. But we didn't believe she was going to, like, no, you're not going to die. You're going to be fine. So we didn't talk about it. Andrew said he would take one day at a time. That's exactly what we've been doing as much as you can. There it is, Dana. Automate as much as possible. So even when our lives are crazy, it is less to manage. Tamara said, I feel like I just have to be okay with doing the best I could each day. And Kara said, did one bill a week. Yeah, yeah, that's it. And that's what I'm trying to do now, even like for my dad, and I've done it for me. I think Kara said it. The automation is key. My mom had done that for another her own separate account that she had with my father at a different bank, and she made me log in about a week before she died. She said, "Hey, log into my thing, change my password." And I look back now, she did that so I would have the access to it, so I would know. So I think that's as much as you can do automatic bill pay, um, that helps, because it's hard. It's hard. And depending, like, if you're that person that has to like do everything for the funeral, you're not going to grieve anyway until afterwards, because you're going to be in automatic mode. So then it hits you later, and then you're trying to balance everything. So, Kara, I think that is so great. Um, and did one bill a week. Yeah, love that. Next question. And if you still feel the need to answer this one, please do in the chat. Oh, okay. Well, look, we're right here, but I think we can think about the poll again. I'm trying to remember what was the top answer.
It was one of the first answer that says not being able to afford doing what you wanted to do. That was 50.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know if we want to spend a little bit time. We have about 5 more minutes. Um, if we wanted to spend a little bit more time kind of talking about, people sharing maybe some resources or things that they've done or thought about, you can raise your hand and join me by a conversation. That's always great. I love to hear your voices. I think, oh, great. Dana says, I found it was about 6 months later when I finally found things slowed down from the to-do list of the death. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I'm still not slowed down. I think we're still trying to figure stuff out. Um, Not doing what you want to do, or the other thing is like having everything in one place, right? Like, I think that's so important. That's one of the things that my mom did have. She had mostly everything in one place. So it was kind of like, hey, if something happens to me, everything you need is on that top shelf over there, and the rest is in the safe. And that's something that I had never thought about doing for myself, not until now. Not even when my brother died. Like, it was still this, that youthful invincibility, like, oh, I'm only such and such age. Um, so yeah, I think those are like more some of my learning lessons. And then I just think, it's hard. Kara says being afraid to spend money since the income was split in half. Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see that. Are you still in that space, or is it getting better? I mean, I know you know, right? We have to identify our needs and our versus our wants, but there's a level where you have to. She said, no, I am. Okay. Yeah, because you got to still do some things for yourself, right? Like the self-care during the grieving is important. Dana says, lean on your community, family, friends, church. People will be happy to pick up your kids from practice, make a meal, buy your groceries for the week. The author just don't know how to help. So true. So true. And everybody, at least in the average, probably the same, right? But as the African American community and my father being a minister, everybody wanted to bring food the day of. Like, that's not really going to help us. There's just too much food. Nobody's going to eat all this food. But there were a few people that this one woman that she started before my mom was sick. Every Sunday, she makes food. And that is like such, yeah, 900 casseroles didn't fit in the fridge. And while it's sweet, but if I had it to do again, Dana, I would do exactly what you said. Hey, I don't need the food, but can you wait maybe 2-3 weeks later? Because everybody's there right after the funeral. It's the weeks after that when you really, really need the support. To your point, like leaning on people to pick the kids up, having the time to just break down and grieve, having the time to go through your finances, like all of that is important. And having the like, I don't want to say confidence, but not feel like you're hurting people's feelings if you say, hey, I don't want this 900th casserole, but I would like you to help me in a couple of weeks, maybe pick up groceries or something to that effect. Tamara says, I learned that funeral homes offer payment plans for their services. I've taken a course on death and dying when I went back to college. And one of the assignments was to interview a funeral director. I procrastinated on this until the last minute because I had recently lost my Mimi and it was difficult. And talking with the man, I mentioned not wanting to think about losing my parents. And the guy said, your dad isn't going anywhere soon. He still owes me money. Broke the awkwardness, but also got some good information. Thank you for saying that because we did miss that. Like, and I think people don't know that. And sometimes when we're working with families, we need to let them know, like, you can start paying at the funeral home. Even if you say you can't afford to do the life insurance, you can just plan your service out and slowly pay them. And the plots, like my mom did, she was paying on the plots since my brother died. And so we just decided, like, we just get this, get my dad's now and finish playing on that, then work on mine. And even though I don't plan and he doesn't plan to be gone anytime soon. So you all have been really great. I really appreciate you. This is a tough subject, right? This is a super tough subject about, finances and death and grief, all at the same time. And so we are at 128. If you have any last minute comments, go ahead and put it in the chat. Want to share some closing things with you. We're going to be continuing our journey. So tomorrow will be part 2 of Dreams and Grief and Dying. And then Friday, we are officially off for Juneteenth. So there will be no webinar. And then Monday will be Environmental Vitality, Preserving Memories and Clearing Spaces with Kathy. Spiritual Vitality in the context of grief, trauma, and loss. That's going to be Ruben. And then Wednesday, Social Vitality, Becoming Who We Are, Kathy Wolf. Please take time to answer the poll. And then last slide, D. Also, we have our Grief Compass, Navigating Trauma and Loss Cafe Booster Pack. Again, it's not just about death, it's about loss in general. This can be, added to your vitality. If you already do vitality cafes, it's a booster pack, and it's also based on the vitality domains. You can find these and purchase these at our website, bestrongfamilies.org/resources. And those of you who have not finished yet, please, we have a few more people to take the poll. And again, we thank you for joining us, for being here with us. Hope to see you tomorrow. You can share the upcoming webinars in the link. And thank you, Tamara. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.